So most of the day we're trying to keep really participatory, but we do just want to take a little time now to each introduce some of the kind of big chunks of strategies and experiences that we've all been involved in and kind of learning about, to bring those ideas into the room. And then our idea is to basically receive some feedback from everyone about which of them are feeling the most alive and which are most connected to your needs and goals. And then we'll spend the rest of the day basically focusing on developing those strategies to really meet the situations that you all are bringing. So we're just going to take about 20 minutes each to talk about some things. So we'll take about an hour now to do this. Then we'll take a little break and come back and do a participatory exercise to kind of gather some ideas of where to go forward. So I was going to begin by talking about this broader context of Co-operate WNC, which is this regional mutual aid network that we're germinating, which has only, it's been incorporated less than 2 years. It's a 501c3 nonprofit right now, which is probably going to be starting a 501c8 organization as well, which is the IRS designation for mutual aid societies, right? So it's a tax status, and our vision is working in the 22 counties of Western North Carolina to grow a mutual aid network that is following the kind of old cultural patterns of mutual aid, where people pool resources, that's financial, but also other types of resources. We pool labor, we pool knowledge, and we kind of create a long-term culture of more interconnectivity and support, and we increase our level of sophistication and organizing power to be able to get things done by working together at a larger scale that we can't get done working on in isolation. This is, for me personally, come out of kind of my work as a permaculture educator and community liver. I live at Earth Haven Eco Village and have lived there for a while, and consultant working with hundreds of landowners and starting to see these patterns emerge, which is how difficult it is to do land-based living and to start long-term projects in the current social and economic environment that we're all in, of this kind of fractured American society where the old, basically cooperative practices and institutions have all been systematically dismantled. And it's not just an accident, it's a deliberate dismantling of cooperative structures that's happened over the last 200 years throughout the Industrial Revolution to tear apart, especially rural communities, and that frees up the people and land and resources to be taken over by industry and large-scale economies. That's the pattern. And so because of that, those of us who are trying to, in many cases, get back into it are like, gosh, this is so hard. And it is so hard because we're dealing with inflated land prices, no intergenerational knowledge transfer, no support systems to help us get these things going, right? If you're going to try to get a black walnut orchard going, what are you going to do in the 15 years until the nut trees start producing to make a living? When there are no long-term support systems, social or economic support systems, we don't have those transition strategies in place. So I started to see that working as a permaculture consultant, all these people who just were trying so hard to get it together and to make it work, but trying to pay for a land mortgage at Asheville level land prices while working a full-time job to pay the mortgage and trying to start a farm on the land. That's really hard, if not impossible. And so I then started studying kind of how have people been doing this, and started getting deeper into the history in all of our ancestral lands, all through wherever you are, Europe, Asia, Africa, the Americas. We all have ancestral, amazing mutual aid and cooperative institutions in our backgrounds, and they've been dismantled at different times in history. And then just recently in the US, there's still some existing and still a lot of vestiges of the United States mutual aid and cooperative institutions. But there were really profound ones at play until just the 1930s, 1940s. So, and what happened then is, right, World War II, and then the USDA put its full weight behind large-scale industrial farming, right? Get big or get out was the official line of the USDA, and that's when they then heavily subsidized large-scale agriculture, converted tank factories from the war into tractor factories, literally converted war chemical factories into agricultural factories, right? And started a whole set of policies which undermined small farmers and forced them to sell their land, which became aggregated into large farms. And that broke up much of the cooperative institutions in this country, which did all kinds of things, including support farmers. So Co-operate WNC, our vision is restarting based on that framework of like, let's work at a scale, 22 counties of Western North Carolina, where we can get it together enough, maybe starting our own credit union, starting our own healthcare cooperative, starting different kinds of microfinancing things to support each other in endeavors, cooperative business training, all kinds of stuff around regenerative agriculture, and linking together these different types of cooperative tools in this long-term network of relationships. So we're supporting each other in informal and formal ways in a long-term kind of approach and vision. That's what Co-operate WNC is about and how it's arisen. And I want to just refer to a few specific examples because here today we have lots of different events. Co-operate WNC is focusing on different types of strategies of land access or healthcare or renewable energy and all kinds of things. But today we're focusing on cooperative agriculture. And so I wanted to bring forward a few specific historical examples of that in this region, which it's just amazing how much is buried right there in history, right under our noses until we learn about it. It's like topsoil. History is like topsoil, right? All you see is the surface, but then if you just dig a little bit under, you start finding the pottery shards, right, and the arrowheads, and like, oh, that's who is here, and it's just right there. But unless we dig, and so like Mari and I were meeting with Jamie Agers, who is the owner of Hickory Nut Gap Farm, which anyone who eats meat in this room has probably eaten Hickory Nut Gap Farm meat. So he told us, this was just like 2 weeks ago, that his family, I didn't know about this. Yeah, his family right here in Fairview in the 1930s started a cooperative farming organization that became a regional cooperative farming organization called the Fairview Farmers Federation. And they then quickly, within 2 months, took the word Fairview off it because it was growing so quickly that it was clear it was going to be bigger than just Fairview. So it was the Farmers Federation. And it was a cooperative farming group of hundreds of farmers who worked together on training, on buying equipment, on getting seeds and keeping livestock varieties going. But the biggest thing that they focused on was on controlling prices of farm goods. And this is emphasized, I'm going to read something from a document about them in a second, that when farmers are working in isolation from each other, in competition, as it were, then one farmer comes in and undercuts everybody's prices, can mess everybody else's economy up. So instead, farmers work together, establish prices that work for everybody, and all agree to sell at that price. And that sets the market rate for a good so it doesn't get artificially depressed by competition, which is what's happened in this country and made food prices artificially low, right? So that was the big thing they were working on. So that's one that just was in this very area, founded by a farming family that's still farming around here and selling the most pastured meat of any company in our area. Another one is the proof is right there in the name, the North Carolina Cooperative Extension Agency, right? What's the history of that? Why is it called the Cooperative Extension Agency? That's not an accident. It turns out it's because the extension part was about creating academic and research support for the existing cooperative farming networks, right? So cooperation in farming was so widespread throughout the United States, it was recognized as kind of the main underlying pattern of farming, that in every state they created these cooperative extension agencies that were seen as a way to bring the agricultural research that was being done in universities and bring the financial and kind of logistical organizing support from local, state, and federal governments to bear on the needs that local farmers and farmer associations were identifying for themselves. So the whole spirit of cooperative extension was not, we're going to top-down organize farmers. It was, what are farmers recognizing in their own needs, and then how can government and university resources be brought to bear to meet those cooperatively determined needs, right? So the cooperative extension still exists, and by the way, I think is a major underutilized resource that could be transformed and brought more into the fold of what we need it to do in the current situation. Yeah.
I just wanted to add to their history that they were looking at rural communities in terms of learning about socializing the youth.
Yeah.
And they made great strides in collecting and preserving the traditions of storytelling and dance, particularly.
Huh. That's interesting.
Oddly enough, they're the oldest support group for that enterprise in the Southeast.
Fascinating. Yeah, that's really interesting. And then the cooperative extension centers still to this day, some of them have, in Western North Carolina, have commercial kitchens in them that can be rented by farmers. They have classroom space in them, so they're a resource. And by the way, that's a big theme of kind of the way we're working with a lot of things in Co-operate WNC, and I think with what we're doing here today is what's called like asset mapping, is understanding what assets do we have at our disposal already that we're just not using well, you know? And rather than reinventing, building a new building with classroom and commercial kitchen when there's already a cooperative extension agency building that could be used in that way, and we just have to make better relationships with them and change the character of the offerings, right? Or emphasize the good stuff they're already doing. So that's a theme, is like, how do we find the stuff that's already working or in place and just head it in a more carefully determined direction, right? Another organization I want to mention is, that maybe some of y'all haven't heard of, is the Federation for Southern Cooperatives, which is a Black-led organization that's based out of Atlanta and works in the Southeast United States. And their entire focus started out in the, I'm not going to get the year right, but it was around 1920, I believe, on helping Black landowners retain land ownership, because there's a whole, obviously, deep history of institutionalized racism in our country, especially the Southeast, and black communities managed to pool money and buy farmland starting after slavery was abolished, because banks wouldn't loan them money, but they pooled money through Black mutual aid societies and use that to buy farmland, among lots of other types of infrastructure and community development. But then as it got up into the 1920s, they had a hard time retaining land ownership because white-led marketing groups and kind of regional distributors were racist and refused to work with Black farmers to sell their goods. So it made it really hard to make enough money to continue paying for their land mortgages and taxes. So this organization started to work together to retain Black farmland ownership, and then branched out into other types of things from there, including agroforestry training and cooperative business development, and then credit union establishment. And they established something like 50 credit unions in the Southeast US, which have now collapsed down to, I believe, 8 or 10 Black-led credit unions. But they're still very active, still based in Atlanta. Unfortunately, they're actually not very active in North Carolina, although they do come here some. So that's another one, and coming up for a different direction. And it's one of, if not the only, major cooperative farming effort that's led by people of color in the Southeast. So it's a really interesting one to kind of study and understand as we're clearly wanting to have that as a big dimension of what we're doing, is not just have this be a white movement. And then the last kind of example I want to mention is the Grange. Who here has heard of the Grange? Okay, half or 2/3 of us. So the Grange, the word Grange literally means a granary, right? It's a place that you store grain. And the Grange is a national U.S. organization that started in the 1870s that has gone through a couple kind of revampings, but the entire thing was it was an agricultural mutual aid society. There's headquarters in Washington, D.C., state offices in every state, and there were hundreds of Grange community centers in many of agriculturally focused states, including North Carolina. There were several Grange community centers just in Buncombe County. Some of them still exist. And those were what they sound like. They were these buildings that were multifunctional buildings with land. Often there was a demonstration and teaching farm on the land. There were classrooms there. They did plant and seed sharing via those buildings. They did agricultural education at the buildings, childhood education, voting and political organizing work, especially for legislation that was related to farming. So all kinds of organizing and cooperation, mutual aid stuff, emergency response that was related to farming. So just want to say that those are some kind of constellation points that we can look to. We don't have to create this from the ground up. People have been here before. So we can look to some of those patterns, and in some cases, some of this infrastructure, social and economic and physical infrastructure exists for us to work from.